Kandahar province, Afghanistan, summer 2016. The convoy never should have taken the eastern road. Colonel Dominic Hargrove knew it the moment the first bullet punched through the windshield of the lead vehicle. Glass exploded inward, showering the driver with fragments that caught the sunlight like diamonds before they drew blood. The sound came half a second later, a sharp crack that echoed off the mud walls of the compound to their left, bouncing between the narrow streets until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Contact left! Contact left! The radio erupted. Voices overlapping frantic professional trained men, doing what trained men do when the world collapses around them. Hargrove was already out of the second vehicle boots, hitting packed dirt, rifle up scanning. 14 soldiers in his detail. 14 lives that depended on the next 30 seconds. The second burst came from the north. Automatic fire raking across the convoy in a diagonal line that stitched the earth and sent dust geysers dancing. A soldier 3 meters to Hargrove's right went down, clutching his shoulder, cursing through clenched teeth. The third volley came from the east. 3 positions. They were boxed in on 3 sides with a crumbling wall at their backs that offered cover but no escape. Ambush. Textbook L-shaped ambush with a blocking element. Hargrove dragged the wounded soldier behind the second vehicle and pressed his back against the engine block. Rounds pinged off metal. The smell of cordite and hot oil filled the air. He keyed his radio. Command, this is Eagle 6. We are taking fire from 3 positions. Grid reference follows. Request immediate air support and QRF. How copy? The response came through static. Eagle 6, no air assets available at this time. QRF is 45 minutes out. Hold your position. 45 minutes. In a kill zone, 45 minutes might as well be 45 years. Hargrove looked at his men. Some were returning fire from behind the vehicles. Others were treating the wounded. One private, barely 20 years old, was frozen against the wheel well of the third truck, eyes wide, hands shaking on his rifle. Hargrove caught his eye and nodded once. Steady, son. The private swallowed hard and raised his weapon. Then something changed. A fighter on the rooftop to the north, the one with the PKM machine gun that had been pouring fire into their position, suddenly dropped. No warning, no visible tracer. No sound that Hargrove could distinguish from the chaos around him. The man simply folded the machine gun, going silent. 2 seconds later, a second fighter in the eastern window jerked backward and disappeared from view. Then a third. This one had been moving between positions on a low wall, running in a crouch. He dropped mid-stride as if someone had cut his strings. Clean, precise, final. Hargrove scanned the surrounding terrain through his scope. Nothing. No muzzle flash, no dust signature. No glint of glass. Whoever was shooting was doing it from beyond visual range, from a distance that shouldn't have been possible. His radio crackled. Command, who is providing overwatch on our position. We have an unknown shooter engaging hostiles. The response was immediate and unsettling. Eagle 6, negative. No friendly assets are deployed to your sector. Repeat, no overwatch has been assigned to your position. A 4th enemy fighter dropped, then a 5th. Each shot was separated by exactly the amount of time it would take to acquire a new target, adjust for a slightly different range and angle, and fire. The rhythm was mechanical, almost inhuman in its consistency. In 7 minutes it was over. Every hostile position had been neutralized. Not suppressed, not scattered. Neutralized. Hargrove counted later. 9 confirmed kills, each one a single round. Each one placed with surgical precision from a direction and distance that his best estimates put at well over a mile. His team survived, all 14. The wounded soldier took a round through the deltoid clean entry, clean exit, and would keep his arm. The young private who had frozen would have nightmares for a year, but he would live to have them. Hargrove stood in the settling dust and looked out at the mountains to the south. Brown rock and brown earth stretching to a horizon that shimmered with heat. Somewhere out there, a ghost had saved their lives and vanished without a word. He never learned who it was. Command told him later it was a classified unit. Ghost operators. Call sign Viper 1. No further details available. No name, no face, no record he could access. He wrote a letter of commendation anyway, addressed to no one, thanking someone he would never meet. He kept a copy in his desk for 3 years. He never knew it was a woman. 3 years later. Arizona Defense Testing Range, present day. 5:30 in the morning. The desert is still dark, the air carrying the last of the night's cold before the sun turns it into a furnace. In a barracks room at the eastern edge of the base, a woman wakes without an alarm. Captain Elara Sinclair opens her eyes and stares at the ceiling for exactly 3 seconds. This is her only concession to the space between sleep and action. 3 seconds to acknowledge that the dreams came again, the same ones always the same, and 3 seconds to put them away. She swings her legs off the bunk, bare feet on cold concrete. She's 32 years old, average height, brown hair that she pulls back into a regulation bun with practiced efficiency. Nothing about her appearance demands attention. No distinguishing features that would make someone look twice. She has cultivated this invisibility the way other soldiers cultivate their reputation. It is a skill and she has mastered it. The coffee pot is scratched metal older than some of the recruits on base. She fills it with water from the sink, measures grounds by feel, sets it on the hot plate. No sugar, no cream, just heat and caffeine. While it percolates, she drops to the floor. 50 push-ups. Not fast, not slow. Each one controlled full extension, chest to the floor. Her breathing stays even. Then sit-ups, 50 more, hands behind her head, core tight. Then stretches slow and deliberate, pulling at muscles and at old scars that run along her left side, across her right shoulder blade, down the back of her right calf. Nobody asks about the scars. Nobody has ever been close enough to see them. From under her bunk, she retrieves a rifle case. Worn canvas, faded olive drab, the zipper pulls wrapped in tape to prevent rattling. Inside lies an M201, O-enhanced sniper rifle. It was decommissioned from her service record 3 years ago. The weapon is not registered to her anymore. It does not appear in any inventory. Officially, it does not exist. This does not matter. Every morning she field strips the rifle on her bunk. Bolt spring firing pin trigger assembly stock scope mount. Each component is cleaned with a cloth that smells faintly of solvent. Each component is inspected, felt with fingertips that know every surface the way a pianist knows keys. Reassembly takes 4 minutes flat. She could do it faster. 4 minutes is the standard she holds herself to because speed without precision is just noise. She drinks her coffee standing at the window. The sun is beginning to touch the mountains to the east, painting the peaks gold, while the valleys remain in shadow. The rifle sits on her bunk behind her, gleaming faintly in the growing light. She finishes the coffee, rinses the cup, sets it upside down on the shelf. By 0600, she is dressed in her standard utility uniform and walking across the training grounds toward the logistics office. Building 7. Supply chains and ammunition inventories. Requisition forms and shipping manifests. The invisible machinery that keeps a military base functioning. Not glamorous, not combat, just necessary. A group of soldiers jogs past on the gravel path. Young men with fresh buzz cuts and loud laughs, their boots hitting the ground in uneven rhythm. One of them, a corporal with a sunburn across his nose, spots her and grins. "Hey, coffee lady, got any donuts today?" Another joins in. "Logistics queen, make sure my ammo order gets priority, yeah." Laughter ripples through the group. Easy, careless, the kind of mockery that comes from men who have never questioned their place in the hierarchy. Elara does not react. She keeps walking, boots crunching on gravel, eyes forward. But her eyes, if anyone had been watching closely enough to notice, are not vacant. They are tracking. The third soldier in the group has a slight limp in his left leg, favoring the knee, probably a sprain he has not reported. The fourth is compensating with his right shoulder, rotating it between strides, a tell that suggests a rotator cuff issue. The flag on the pole, 30 meters to her right, is stretched at a 15-degree angle from vertical, which means the wind is coming from the northwest at roughly 8 miles per hour. From the echo of practice shots drifting across the base, she calculates the distance to the firing range at 412 meters, give or take 3. She notices everything. She always has. The difference between Elara Sinclair and most people is not that she sees more. It is that she cannot stop seeing. The world presents itself to her as a continuous stream of data, distances, angles, velocities, patterns, and her mind processes it automatically the way a heart beats without being told to. At the ammunition depot, the morning shift is already underway. Crates stacked on pallets, forklifts moving between rows, the sharp chemical smell of gunpowder sealed in brass. Elara checks the clipboard hanging by the entrance, scans the overnight delivery log, notes a discrepancy in the count for 7.62 NATO rounds, and makes a mental note to follow up. Inside, a new recruit is kneeling on the concrete floor, face red with embarrassment. A crate lies on its side next to him, and bullets are scattered across the ground. Mixed calibers, different weights, different manufacturers. Chaos in brass and copper. The kid mutters a curse under his breath and starts grabbing rounds at random, trying to scoop them back into the crate. Elara crouches beside him without a word. Her hands move over the scattered ammunition the way a dealer moves over cards. She picks up each round, feels its weight, reads the head stamp with her thumb, and places it precisely where it belongs. 762, NATO here. 308 Winchester there. 556 in this pile. Match grade separated from standard ball. Sorted by caliber, by weight, by manufacturer in under 30 seconds. The recruit stares at her. His mouth opens and closes. How did you do that? Physics, Elara says. She stands, dusts off her hands, and walks away. Behind her in the doorway of the depot office, Staff Sergeant Nolan Briggs has been watching. He is a career soldier, 15 years in, with the quiet competence of a man who has learned more from observation than from orders. He watches Elara walk away, and his eyes narrow. That was not random. That was not luck or some party trick learned from a YouTube video. That was training, deep training. The kind that comes from years of handling ammunition in conditions where knowing the difference between a 168-grain round and a 175-grain round by touch alone could mean the difference between a hit and a miss at extreme range. Briggs makes a mental note. He says nothing to anyone. Later that morning, a briefing room in the operations building. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air conditioning fighting a losing battle against the Arizona heat. 15 officers sit in folding chairs arranged in rows. Elara is among them, seated near the back notepad, open pen ready. Major Hollis Pruitt stands at the front of the room. He's a broad man with a voice that fills spaces without effort. The kind of officer who commands attention simply by existing. Behind him, a projector displays a slide with bold text. The 4,000-meter challenge. Experimental long-range protocol. Pruitt clicks to the next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, we are selecting candidates for the Ghost Training Program. Advanced long-range engagement, extreme distance, extreme conditions. He pauses for emphasis. We are looking for the best. The next slide shows names. 13 of them. Elite snipers. Competition champions. Combat veterans with confirmed kills at distances that most marksmen consider theoretical. Captain Garrett Thornton's name sits at the top of the list, underlined. Elara scans the names. Hers is not among them. Pruitt glances toward the back of the room, and for a moment his eyes meet Elara's. His expression carries nothing personal, just the bureaucratic certainty of a man following protocol. Captain Sinclair, this selection is for combat personnel only. No logistics officers. Elara nods once. She does not argue. She does not protest. She does not shift in her chair or clench her jaw or show any outward sign that the words have landed. But beneath the table her hands curl, slightly fingertips pressing into her palms. Just for a second. Then they relax. After the meeting, the officers file out. Small clusters form in the hallway, conversations about the challenge, speculation about who will make the cut, quiet bets being placed. No one speaks to Elara. She walks alone back toward the barracks, the sun high, now brutal and white, casting sharp shadows that pool beneath her boots. She passes the firing range on her way. The selected candidates are already there, zeroing their weapons testing equipment, getting a feel for the conditions. She can hear the measured crack of rifles, the metallic ping of spent casings hitting concrete, the low murmur of spotters calling adjustments. Through the chain-link fence she watches without stopping. Thornton is on the far lane, prone behind his custom Chaytak, making micro-adjustments to his scope. Even from 50 meters away, Elara can see the tension in his shoulders, the slight forward lean that means he is overcompensating for a wind that is not as strong as he thinks it is. His spotter is reading from a kestrel, feeding him numbers that are accurate but incomplete. Instruments tell you what the wind is doing now. They do not tell you what it will be doing in 4 seconds when the bullet reaches its target. Elara processes this without thinking about it, the way a musician hears a wrong note in a symphony. She does not judge Thornton. His technique is excellent, among the best she has seen outside of her old unit. But technique at 4,000 meters is not enough. At that distance, the world stops obeying the rules that work at shorter ranges. The air becomes a living adversary. The laws of physics do not change, but their consequences multiply until even small errors become catastrophic. She knows this because she has lived in that space between the possible and the impossible for 15 years. She knows it the way a deep-sea diver knows pressure, not as an abstract concept, but as a physical reality that presses against every surface of your existence. She does not stop to watch. She keeps walking. In the barracks, she sits on her bunk in the silence. The room is spare, regulation furniture, regulation bedding, nothing on the walls. No photographs displayed. No personal touches that might invite questions or conversation. The only decoration is a crack in the concrete above the window that Elara has measured at 13 centimeters and watches grow by imperceptible fractions each season as the desert heat and cold work on the building the way time works on everything. The only personal items are in her locker. She opens it now, reaching past folded clothes and standard gear to the bottom shelf, where a small wooden box sits in the shadow. She lifts it carefully, as if it contains something that might break, or something that might bite. Inside the box is a photograph. Faded, creased at one corner, the colors washed out by time and desert light. 5 soldiers in desert camouflage standing in front of a mud-walled compound with mountains rising behind them. They are smiling. A younger Elara is in the center, her arm around the shoulder of a tall sergeant with a wide grin. To her left, a woman with short dark hair and sharp eyes is mid-laugh, caught in a moment of joy that the camera preserved like amber preserving an insect. 2 more soldiers flank the group, one giving a thumbs up, the other making a face at the camera. Sergeant Wes Calloway, Specialist Darcy Helms, Corporal Joel Stratton, Lieutenant Connor Whitfield, her team, her ghost unit, her family in a place where family was the only thing that kept you human. Below the photograph, resting on a square of black velvet, is a silver bullet casing. It has been polished until it shines. Engraved on its surface are coordinates and a date. The coordinates point to a valley in Kandahar province. The date reads June 14th, 2016. Elara holds the casing between her thumb and forefinger. It is warm from the heat of the barracks, and for a moment she can almost feel the heat of that other day, the day the world split open and swallowed 4 people she loved. She closes the box, slides it back into the darkness of her locker. Some ghosts are better left sleeping. That evening in the officers' mess hall, Captain Garrett Thornton holds court. He sits at the center of a long table surrounded by fellow snipers and junior officers who orbit him like satellites around the planet. Thornton is 35, tall, lean, with the coiled energy of a man who has spent his entire adult life training his body to be still when it matters most. 87 confirmed kills, 2 consecutive military sniper championships, a reputation that precedes him into every room like a herald announcing a king. He is talking about Viper 1. You know the story, he says, leaning back in his chair. Ghost Unit Sniper active 2014 to 2017. 47 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. 17 missions with 0 friendly casualties. He shakes his head slowly, and there is something in his expression that sits between admiration and hunger. Nobody knows who it was. The records are sealed. The unit was disbanded. Lieutenant Brennan Caldwell, seated across from him, takes a drink from his glass. You think the records are real, 47, at that range? Thornton's eyes sharpen. I have studied every long-range record in this military's history. Every confirmed kill, every equipment log, every after-action report I could get my hands on. Viper 1's numbers are not just real. They are the best this country has ever produced, and nobody even knows the shooter's name. He leans forward. I have been chasing that standard for 6 years. Tomorrow, at 4,000 meters, I intend to set a new one. The table erupts in murmurs of approval. Someone raises a glass. Thornton acknowledges it with a nod, but his mind is elsewhere. Behind his confidence, behind the easy charisma and the decorated record, there is a man who measures himself against a ghost, a shadow he has never met and can never confront. Viper 1 is not just a record to Thornton. It is the proof that someone out there was better than him, and he has never been able to accept that. He does not know that Viper 1 is 200 meters away, sitting alone in a barracks room holding a spent bullet casing and remembering the dead. Night falls over the Arizona base. The temperature drops 30 degrees in an hour, the desert releasing the day's heat into a sky crowded with stars. Somewhere on the range, a coyote calls out a thin sound, swallowed by the vastness. From the officers' club, muffled laughter and the clink of glasses carry across the still air. The snipers are celebrating their selection. They have no idea what tomorrow will bring, neither does Elara. In her room, Elara lies on her bunk staring at the ceiling. The ceiling is painted government white, chipped in places where the desert dryness has pulled the paint away from the concrete. She has memorized every chip, every crack, every imperfection in the surface. 3 years of ceilings. 3 years of nights like this one. Sleep will come eventually, but not yet. It never comes easily the night before something changes. And something is changing. She can feel it the way she feels wind shifts, not through any single sense, but through all of them at once, a pressure, a tilt in the atmosphere that precedes a storm. She did not plan to volunteer tomorrow. She has spent 3 years building a life in the margins, quiet, invisible, safe. She files requisition forms and counts ammunition and eats alone in the corner of the mess hall and tells herself that this is enough, that she has earned the right to be ordinary, that there is honor in stepping back, in choosing silence, in letting the world forget what she can do. And part of that is true. There is honor in it. The kind of honor that nobody sees, which is the only kind that matters to Elara Sinclair. But the truth, she keeps in the same dark place as the wooden box, is that she has been dying slowly in Building 7. Not the dramatic death of a soldier in combat, but the quiet death of a woman pretending to be less than she is. Every morning she strips and cleans a rifle she is not supposed to own. Every morning she reads the wind and calculates distances she will never fire across. Every morning she practices being a ghost in a world that has already forgotten she was ever anything more. She thinks about Thornton's words in the mess hall. Viper 1, 47 confirmed kills. The best this country has ever produced, and nobody even knows the shooter's name. He was talking about her with reverence and hunger, studying her record like a sacred text, chasing her standard for 6 years, and he did not know she was sitting 200 meters away sorting ammunition in a supply depot. There is something almost funny about it. Almost. But laughter requires a lightness that Elara does not carry anymore. Tomorrow, 13 men will try to hit a target at 4,000 meters. 13 men with decorated records and specialized equipment and the full confidence of the United States military behind them. Elara Sinclair, Logistics Officer, Building 7, will watch from the back of the crowd. That is the plan. But plans she knows better than most rarely survive contact with reality. She closes her eyes. Sleep comes, and with it the dreams. The same compound, the same gunfire, the same faces. Calloway's wide grin going slack. Helms's sharp laugh cut short. Stratton's thumbs up frozen in midair. Whitfield's voice on the radio calm to the last calling coordinates he would never hear confirmed. She wakes at 5:30, makes coffee, does push-ups, strips and cleans her rifle. The sun rises, the day begins, and nothing on the surface is different from any other morning. But beneath the surface, in the place where Elara Sinclair keeps the things that matter most, something is stirring. Something old, something precise. Something that has been waiting 3 years to wake up. The long-range testing facility sits at the western edge of the base, where the desert opens its mouth and swallows the horizon. There is nothing gentle about this landscape. Red earth and scrub brush stretch toward mountains that look painted against a sky so blue it hurts to stare at. Heat rises from the ground in visible waves, bending the air, turning the distant terrain into something liquid, something unreliable. By 0800, the bleachers are full. 200 soldiers in desert utilities seated in rows along the observation platform, squinting against the sun that has already begun its assault on everything below. This is not a standard exercise. Word has spread across the base the way it always does in places where boredom and ambition live side by side. The Ghost training program, 4,000 meters, the impossible shot. General Dominic Hargrove stands at the front of the observation platform, his uniform pressed sharp despite the heat, his silver hair catching the light. Behind him, a massive display screen shows a live feed from cameras positioned downrange. The target is a steel silhouette, human-shaped, planted in the earth 4,000 meters away. At this distance, it is invisible to the naked eye. Even through high-powered optics, it shimmers and dances in the thermal distortion like a mirage trying to decide whether it exists. Hargrove addresses the assembled soldiers. His voice carries the weight of a man who has sent people to die and brought others home, and who understands that those two things are never as far apart as anyone would like to believe. This is not about ego. He pauses, letting the silence work. This is about pushing human capability to its edge. The Ghosty training program needs operators who can make impossible shots in impossible conditions, not on a range with perfect weather and no pressure, out there in the real world, where the wind lies and the heat cheats and the only thing standing between your team and a body bag is the person behind the rifle. He gestures toward the range. The gesture is almost casual, but every eye follows his hand. 4,000 meters. Variable wind. Thermal distortion affecting ballistics above 500 meters. Bullet drop exceeding 800 feet. He lets those numbers settle. One shot. Whoever makes it earns their place. A murmur rolls through the crowd. 800 feet of bullet drop. At that distance, the bullet will arc higher than a 50-story building before falling back to Earth. The flight time will be nearly 4 seconds. 4 seconds during which the wind, the temperature, the rotation of the planet itself will conspire to push that tiny piece of copper and lead away from its intended destination. 13 men step forward from the front row. They move with the particular confidence of specialist men who have spent years refining a single skill to its sharpest point. Decorated records, tournament titles, triple-digit confirmed kills. The best marksmen the United States military can assemble on short notice. Captain Garrett Thornton stands among them slightly apart, the way a lead actor stands apart from the chorus. His rifle case is custom hard-sided, bearing no insignia. His expression is the carefully composed mask of a man who has already decided he will succeed. The crowd watches in respectful silence as the first shooter takes position. He's a staff sergeant from Fort Bragg, methodical, unhurried. He lies behind a Barrett MRAD, checks wind speed with a handheld Kestrel device, enters humidity readings into a ballistic calculator strapped to his forearm. He adjusts his scope with micro-precision clicks, each one a fraction of a degree. He controls his breathing, settles into the stock. The rifle becomes an extension of his skeleton. He fires. The shot cracks across the desert, a sound that starts sharp and ends in a long, rolling echo that takes seconds to fade. The crowd leans forward. 4 seconds pass. 4 seconds of absolute silence. Then the spotter's voice, amplified through the PA system. "Miss, left 2 meters!" A collective exhale. The shooter stands, rolls his shoulders, steps back from the line. His face shows frustration, but it is controlled professional. He knows the conditions, he knows how close he was and how far. The second sniper takes his place. He is faster, more instinctive, a former Marine Scout sniper whose reputation rests on cold-bore shots, first round out of a cold barrel, no warm-up, no second chances. He adjusts his scope, takes one breath and fires. Miss right 3 meters. Third shooter, a warrant officer who has made confirmed kills at 3,000 meters in Afghanistan. He spends 90 seconds calculating before he fires. Miss high 1.5 meters. Fourth, fifth, sixth. Each one brings a different philosophy. Each one represents thousands of hours of training, hundreds of thousands of rounds fired in practice, a lifetime of learning to read wind and distance and gravity. Each one misses. The 7th shooter is a master sergeant with 22 years of service. He has made shots in Iraq and Afghanistan in places whose names he is not allowed to speak. He takes the longest to set up nearly 3 minutes of calculations, his spotter feeding him data from instruments that cost more than most civilians earn in a year. When he fires, the crowd holds its breath longer than they have for any previous shot. The silence after the crack of the rifle stretches like a rubber band being pulled to its limit. Miss. Left 1.7 meters. 1.7. The closest anyone has come. A murmur of something like hope passes through the crowd, but it dies quickly. Close at this distance might as well be miles. The 8th shooter misses high. The 9th misses right. The 10th, a young warrant officer who has won 3 consecutive service rifle championships, takes a different approach entirely. He abandons the standard firing position, adjusts his body angle, rests the rifle on a custom bipod he has designed himself. His technique is unorthodox, elegant, the product of original thinking applied to an ancient discipline. He fires with confidence. Miss. Low 3.2 meters. The crowd's energy shifts. The initial excitement fades into something quieter, something uneasy. By the 7th miss, the whispering starts. By the 10th, it is no longer whispering. The conditions must be impossible. Maybe the target sensors are malfunctioning. Maybe this whole thing is a setup. Some kind of test that is not really about shooting. General Hargrove watches without expression, arms crossed over his chest. His face gives away nothing, but his eyes are active, scanning the crowd, reading the mood the way a commander reads a battlefield. 11th miss. The shot goes low by 4 meters, embedding itself in the hard-packed earth and sending up a plume of dust that hangs in the still air like a question mark. 12th miss. Right by 2.5 meters. Thornton steps forward for the 13th and final attempt. The crowd goes quiet again. This is the moment they have been waiting for. Thornton is the best among them, the number 1 ranked marksman on base, the man who has spent 6 years studying every long-range record in the military's history. If anyone can make this shot, it is him. He sets up with the precision of a man performing a ritual. Every movement deliberate, every adjustment calculated. He lies behind his rifle, a custom Chaytak M200 intervention that he has tuned and modified himself over the course of 2 years. The scope alone costs more than most soldiers earn in a month. He breathes, settles. The crowd holds its breath with him. He fires. The crack of the rifle is louder than the others, or perhaps it only seems that way because of the weight of expectation riding on it. The echo rolls out across the desert, bouncing off distant rock formations, fading into the vastness. 4 seconds. Miss right 5 meters. The number lands like a slap. 5 meters. Not just a miss, but the worst miss of the day. The farthest from the target of all 13 attempts. A sound moves through the crowd. Not laughter, something worse. The intake of breath that accompanies the witnessing of a fall. Thornton stands. His face is white beneath his tan. His hands, the hands that have held steady through 87 kills, are clenched at his sides. Something behind his eyes fractures a small crack in the foundation of a man who has built his identity on being the best, and who has just failed publicly, catastrophically, in front of every soldier on base. He steps back from the line without a word. Hargrove scans the assembled soldiers. His voice carries across the silence. Anyone else? The question hangs in the hot air. Nobody moves. The best snipers on base have just failed every single one of them. Who else would possibly step forward? What kind of arrogance or delusion would it take to walk up to that line after 13 consecutive misses and believe you could do better? Silence stretches. 5 seconds. 10. Then a voice. Female. Calm, steady. Cutting through the heat the way a blade cuts through cloth. May I try, sir? Every head turns. 200 soldiers swivel in their seats, searching for the source of the voice. Confusion ripples through the formation like wind across water. Elara Sinclair steps forward from the back of the crowd. She moves through the rows of seated soldiers with an unhurried stride, weaving between shoulders and elbows, her eyes fixed on the firing line ahead. She is not wearing tactical gear. No specialized equipment hangs from her vest. No spotter walks beside her calling adjustments. She is wearing her standard utility uniform, the same one she wears to Building 7 every morning, to count ammunition and file requisition forms. No badges, no insignia of distinction. Just a woman walking toward a rifle. Lieutenant Brennan Caldwell laughs. Not a subtle laugh, not a controlled chuckle, but a genuine bark of disbelief that cuts across the silence. You serious right now? Thornton, still standing near the line, his face still carrying the sting of his failure, looks at Elara with an expression that mixes contempt with something raw, a logistics officer. She does not even have a combat qualification. Maybe she will hit the sky, someone mutters from the bleachers. Laughter spreads. It is the laughter of relief, of tension breaking in the easiest possible direction. After 13 failures by 13 elite marksmen, the idea of a supply clerk stepping up to the line is not threatening. It is comedy. Elara keeps walking, eyes straight ahead. The laughter washes over her and past her like wind over stone. General Hargrove studies her as she approaches. Something flickers in his memory. A sensation more than a thought, the feeling of almost recognizing a face in a crowd. Her walk, the set of her shoulders, the particular quality of calm in her expression. Not the calm of someone who does not understand the difficulty, but the calm of someone who understands it completely and is not impressed by it. He has seen that calm before. Somewhere. He cannot place it. Captain Sinclair, his voice is measured. You understand this is 4,000 meters, variable wind. Thermal distortion affecting ballistics above 500 meters. Yes, sir, I understand. 6 words. No elaboration. No justification. No plea for a chance, just a statement of fact delivered in a voice that does not waver. Hargrove holds her gaze for a long moment. Around them, the laughter has faded into curious silence. He nods. 1 shot, Captain. Make it count. Elara approaches the firing line. The rifle waiting there is the same Chaytak intervention that Thornton just used, still warm from his attempt. She picks it up, feels its weight. It is not her M2010. The balance is different, the trigger pull slightly heavier, the scope mounted 3 millimeters higher than she would prefer. She checks the action cycles. The bolt looks through the scope at a world reduced to a circle of magnified heat shimmer. Around her, soldiers whisper and smirk. This should be entertaining. A logistics officer trying to outshoot the best snipers on base. A punchline walking up to a rifle. But Elara does not hear them anymore. She has entered the space she goes to when the world needs to shrink. The space where there is no crowd, no judgment, no past, no future. Only the physics of the present moment. She pulls a small leather notebook from her cargo pocket. It falls open to a page dense with handwritten calculations. Wind drift formulas, atmospheric pressure tables, Coriolis effect adjustments for various latitudes, bullet drop curves for 17 different calibers. The handwriting is neat, precise, the work of years condensed into pages that she has filled and refilled and memorized until the numbers live in her bones. She glances at the wind flags positioned along the range. 2 are showing northeast, 1 is showing east. Northeast, and the farthest visible flag is hanging nearly limp. Wind shear, different speeds at different distances. She watches the heat shimmer dancing above the desert floor, reads the invisible patterns in the air the way a sailor reads currents. From her pocket she retrieves a single bullet. She holds it up to the light, turning it between her fingers. She has carried this round for 2 days since the moment she heard about the challenge. Custom weighted, perfectly balanced. Prepared in her quarters using tools that a logistics officer should not possess for a shot that a logistics officer should never need to take. She loads the round with a motion so practiced it takes less than a second. The bolt closes with a solid click. The crowd leans in despite themselves. The laughter has died completely, now replaced by a silence that is equal parts skepticism and involuntary fascination. Elara settles behind the rifle, adjusts the stock against her shoulder, presses her cheek to the rest, looks through the scope. The sun beats down, sweat forms on brows throughout the crowd. The heat is a living thing pressing against skin-filling lungs with air that feels like it has already been breathed. But Elara's breathing is steady, slow, controlled. Her heart rate drops, 59 beats per minute, the rhythm of a woman who has learned to make her body obey her mind in the moments when it matters most. The wind shifts slightly, a quarter degree clockwise. Without instruments, without calculation aids, without looking away from her scope, she adjusts. 0.3 milliradians right. Her fingers move the turret with the delicacy of a watchmaker adjusting a spring. Her world narrows to a single point 4,000 meters away. Everything else dissolves. The crowd, the whispers, the doubt, the laughter of men who looked at her and saw nothing worth respecting. The memories that visit her at night, the wooden box in her locker, the 4 names carved in stone. Only the target exists. Her breathing slows further. In, hold, out, hold. She learned this rhythm in mountains where the air was thin and every breath was a decision. Where one shot meant the difference between mission success and body bags coming home to families who would never understand why. Through her scope, heat waves dance like spirits. The target wavers, distorted by temperature gradients and atmospheric interference. It is not where it appears to be. At this distance, physics lies. Light bends, air deceives. The target is a ghost of itself displaced by the atmosphere, and only someone who has spent years learning to read those lies can find the truth hidden beneath them. Wind speed 12 miles per hour, gusting to 15. Direction northeast shifting. Deflection right, but the gust pattern will create vertical drift on an 8-second cycle. Compensate left by 1.8 meters, down by 0.4. Temperature 96 degrees Fahrenheit. Air pressure 30.12 inches of mercury. Humidity 18%. She does not need instruments. Her body reads the environment the way others read words on a page. Bullet drop at 4,000 meters, approximately 819 feet. Flight time 3.8 seconds at this muzzle velocity. Her mind runs the calculation faster than most people can type the numbers. Coriolis effect. The rotation of the Earth will push the bullet right at this latitude, roughly 6 inches at 4,000 meters. Adjust left. Spin drift. The rifling of the barrel will impart a rightward rotation that translates to lateral movement over distance. Another 0.3 inches. Adjust again. All of this happens in her mind in less than 10 seconds. Not calculated exactly. Felt. The numbers are so deeply embedded in her neural pathways that they arrive as instinct, as sensation, as a kind of knowledge that exists below the level of conscious thought. Her finger rests on the trigger. Not pulling, just feeling. The rifle has become an extension of her body, her intent, her will. She exhales halfway. Holds. Her heart beats once, twice. On the third beat, in the space between breaths in the fraction of a second where body and weapon and wind and gravity align, she fires. The shot cracks like thunder, breaking over a clear sky. The rifle kicks against her shoulder, a familiar violence almost comforting in its predictability. The bullet leaves the barrel at 3,000 feet per second, spinning at 200,000 rotations per minute, a tiny missile carrying her intent across 2.5 miles of hostile air. The crowd watches frozen. Some have stopped breathing. The bullet climbs invisible, tracing an arc that rises hundreds of feet above the desert floor before beginning its long descent. Wind catches it, pushes it right, but Elara's adjustments hold. Gravity pulls it earthward, but her calculations predicted this pull to the inch. 3.8 seconds feels like an hour. Then, from 4,000 meters away, a sound. Distant but unmistakable. Metal striking metal. A clear, bright ring that carries across the desert like a bell. Through the spotting scope, the observation officer whispers first, as if speaking too loudly might undo what he is seeing. Impact! Then louder, his voice breaking slightly. Impact, dead center. The crowd erupts. 200 soldiers on their feet shouting, the sound crashing across the desert like a wave breaking against a rock. But the noise is distant to Elara, muffled, belonging to a world she has not fully returned to yet. She engages the safety. Sets the rifle down carefully, placing it on the mat the way you would place a sleeping child in a crib. Removes her hearing protection. Folds it neatly. Her hands are steady. Her expression is calm. She might have just finished filing a requisition form. General Hargrove steps forward. He stares at the screen displaying the target image. The bullet hole is centered with a precision that looks mechanical, as if a machine had placed it there, rather than a human being firing from 2.5 miles away through wind and heat and the curvature of the earth. "How did you make that correction?" He says it quietly, but the PA system carries his voice to every ear on the platform. Elara meets his eyes. "Physics, sir. Wind right to left 14.3 miles per hour average with gusts to 15. Temperature at 96 degrees creates mirage effect at 600 meters requiring compensation. Left 1.8 meters down 0.4. Standard ballistics." Caldwell's face has gone pale. His laughter from 3 minutes ago now hangs around his neck like a weight. There is nothing standard about that shot. Elara's expression does not change. It is just math and practice. Hargrove studies her. The flicker of recognition from earlier has become a flame. He knows this voice, this calm, this absolute unshakable precision delivered without bravado, without showmanship, without any apparent need for acknowledgement. "Where did you learn to aim like that, Captain?" Elara hesitates. A fraction of a second, barely visible, but Hargrove catches it. The first crack in her composure all day. "Afghanistan, sir, 2016, Operation Silent Guardian." The name hits Hargrove like a physical force. His body goes still. Silent Guardian. Kandahar province. The convoy. The ambush. The ghost who saved 14 lives from an impossible distance and vanished without a trace. She is still talking. "I was your overwatch." 4 words, delivered quietly, almost gently. Hargrove's eyes widen. The memory does not just return. It floods. The crackle of the radio, the dust and the blood, the sound of his soldiers screaming and firing and dying and not dying because someone somewhere from some impossible distance was placing rounds with inhuman precision into every hostile position. Command told him it was a ghost unit, call sign Viper 1. They never told him anything else. They certainly never told him that the shooter who saved his entire team, the Phantom Marksman, whose identity was sealed behind classification levels he could not access, was a 32-year-old woman who had spent the last 3 years counting bullets in a supply depot 200 meters from his office. "You." Hargrove breathes the word. "You saved my entire team." Elara nods once. A single dip of the chin, no pride in it, no satisfaction, just confirmation of a fact. The crowd has gone silent again, but this silence is nothing like the one that preceded her shot. That silence was skepticism. This silence is awe. 200 soldiers processing the revelation that the logistics officer they have been calling Coffee Lady, the woman they overlooked and dismissed and laughed at, is the most lethal sniper their military has produced in a generation. And now the legend is standing 10 feet away from him. She weighs 130 pounds, she works in Building 7, she sorts ammunition by touch and drinks black coffee from a scratched metal pot, and has never once in the 3 years they have served on the same base given any indication that she is anything more than what she appears to be. The corporal with the sunburn who had called her Coffee Lady 3 days ago now stepped aside when she approached the depot entrance, holding the door without a word. The group of joggers who had mocked her on the gravel path now ran in silence when they passed her, their eyes forward, their laughter saved for other moments and other targets. Nobody called her Logistics Queen anymore. On the morning of the 3rd day, Lieutenant Brennan Caldwell appeared at the depot entrance. He stood in the doorway for nearly a minute before Elara looked up from her inventory tablet, as if he needed that time to assemble the words in the correct order, to arrange them in a formation that would not collapse under the weight of what they needed to carry. Captain Sinclair, his hands were behind his back. His posture was rigid, the posture of a man performing an act that costs him something. He was young 26, and youth makes apologies harder because it has not yet learned that admitting error is not the same as admitting weakness. I owe you an apology. Elara glanced up from her tablet. Her expression was neutral. Not cold, not warm. The expression of a woman who has learned to wait before reacting, to let the other person finish before deciding what their words are worth. For what? For laughing. He paused. For doubting you. It was unprofessional. She considered this. Considered him. The flush on his neck, the rigidity of his shoulders, the way his eyes met hers and then flickered away and then forced themselves back. He meant it. The apology was not a performance for an audience. There was no audience. Just the two of them, and the smell of gunpowder and packing grease. Accepted. You did not know. Still, it was wrong. Elara set down her tablet. She gave him her full attention, and Caldwell discovered that being the focus of Elara Sinclair's full attention was like standing in a searchlight. Nowhere to hide. He shifted his weight. Could I ask you something? Go ahead. How did you learn to shoot like that? I have been training for 10 years, and I have never seen anyone make corrections the way you did. Without instruments, without a spotter. Just your eyes and that notebook. Elara was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the particular patience of someone who has been asked this question before, perhaps only by herself in the dark, in the years when she had no one else to ask. You have been training for 10 years. I have been calculating for 15. There is a difference. Caldwell waited. Every shot is a math problem, Elara said. Wind speed, bullet drop, air density, temperature, the rotation of the earth. If you can solve the equation, you can make the shot. She paused. But the instinct you are asking about is not instinct. It is repetition. 10,000 hours of reading wind. Another 10,000 understanding how a bullet behaves when the air does not cooperate. Practice until the calculations become automatic. Practice until your body does the math before your mind finishes asking the question. Caldwell nodded slowly, absorbing this the way dry earth absorbs rain, not all at once, but in layers. There is no secret, Elara continued. Just work. Most people want the result without the process. They see the shot and think it is talent. It is not talent, it is labor. Patient, repetitive, unglamorous labor performed in silence for years with no guarantee that it will ever matter. She picked up her tablet and returned to her inventory. The conversation was over, not because she was dismissing him, but because she had said everything there was to say, and Elara Sinclair did not waste words any more than she wasted bullets. Caldwell lingered a moment longer, then turned and walked away. He did not jog. He walked slowly, thinking about what it means to spend 15 years learning something that takes 4 seconds to execute. That evening a knock came at Elara's barracks door. She opened it expecting Caldwell again, or perhaps one of the other officers whose curiosity had overcome their pride in the days since the shot. It was Thornton. He stood in the hallway with none of the swagger that usually preceded him into a room. His hands hung at his sides. His shoulders, which normally carried the squared-off confidence of a man who knew exactly where he stood in every hierarchy, were lowered. Not slumped. Just lowered. The posture of a man who has set something heavy down and is still feeling the absence of its weight. Captain Sinclair, may I come in? Elara studied him for a moment. She had not spoken to Thornton since the range. She had seen him across the compound, always at a distance, always moving in a different direction. She had assumed he was avoiding her. She was right, but she had not guessed why. She stepped aside. Thornton entered the small room and stood in the center of it, looking at the bare walls, the regulation bunk, the scratched coffee pot. The room of someone who had stripped her life to its essentials and found that the essentials did not take up much space. I am not here to apologize for laughing, he said. Others laughed louder. That is not what I need to say. Elara waited. Thornton was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The confidence was gone. What remained was something rawer, something that had been living beneath the surface for months, maybe longer, waiting for the weight above it to crack enough to let it breathe. You are Viper 1. I spent 6 years studying your record. Every shot, every mission, every number I could find. I built my career trying to surpass you. Elara said nothing. When I saw you step up to that line in your logistics uniform, no spotter, no equipment, I thought it was a joke. He paused. And when you made the shot, I felt something break. Not just my pride, something deeper. Something I have been holding together with tape and willpower for 8 months. He looked at his hands, extended them in front of him, palms down. They were trembling. A fine, constant vibration, barely visible but unmistakable to anyone who knew what steady hands were supposed to look like. Syria, he said. Last deployment, 9 months ago. My spotter and I were providing overwatch for a convoy moving through a contested village. Intelligence identified a target on a rooftop. Male military age carrying what the thermal scope showed as a weapon. I had confirmation from command. I took the shot. He stopped, swallowed. It was not a weapon, it was a radio antenna. And it was not a hostile. It was Corporal Brannigan from 2nd Platoon who had gotten separated from his unit and was trying to signal for extraction. He was wearing local clothing as concealment. The thermal reading matched the profile. The intelligence matched. Everything matched except the truth. The room was very quiet. I killed one of our own, Thornton said. Friendly fire. The investigation cleared me. Faulty intelligence, mistaken identification, fog of war. Every official channel said it was not my fault. But my hands started shaking 2 weeks later and they have not stopped. He lowered his hands. I have been hiding it. Medication. Grip exercises, compensating with equipment. Nobody knew until that shot at the range, 5 meters off, the worst miss of the day. He looked at Elara. My hands betrayed me in front of 200 people and the only thing I could think about was not Brannigan and not my career, but you. Standing there, calm, making a shot I will never be able to make. And I realized that you are everything I pretended to be. Elara was quiet for a long time. She did not rush to fill the silence with comfort or reassurance. She understood that some words need space around them, the way some wounds need air. When she spoke, her voice was steady but not hard. You think I left combat because I was tired of shooting people. That is what I told the general. It is true, but it is not the whole truth. I left because I learned something you are learning right now. That precision is not armor, that being the best does not protect you from the things that being the best requires you to do. I made every shot perfectly in Cobble Valley and 4 of my people still died. Not because I missed. Because perfection is not enough. She looked at him directly. Your hands are not the problem, Thornton. Your hands are telling you something your mind does not want to hear. You need to talk to someone qualified, not me, a doctor, someone trained in this. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing a soldier can do, admitting that the war followed you home. Thornton's jaw tightened. And my career. Elara considered this. There are many ways to serve that do not require lying behind a rifle. Your experience, your knowledge of fieldcraft, your understanding of what happens when a shot goes wrong, those things have value. More value than another 100 kills on your record. Thornton stood there for a moment longer. He did not say thank you. He did not promise to seek help. He did not offer any of the tidy resolutions that people offer when they want a conversation to feel finished. He simply nodded once, the way one soldier nods to another when something has been understood that does not need to be spoken, and walked out. Elara listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway. She noticed without trying to notice that his stride was slightly different than when he had arrived. Not lighter exactly, but steadier. As if something that had been clenched for 8 months had loosened by a single degree. It was not much, but it was enough to start. The next morning, dawn broke cold and clear over the memorial wall at the base's eastern edge. Polished black granite reflected the rising sun, its surface covered in the names of soldiers who did not come home. The wall faced east by design so that the first light of each new day would touch these names before it touched anything else. A small gesture of priority that the living offered to the dead. Elara stood before it alone. Her breath formed small clouds in the early morning air. The desert before dawn is a different world from the desert at noon. Cold. Still. The silence not empty but full-weighted with the presence of everything the daylight burns away. Her fingers traced 4 names. She did not need to search for them. She could find them blind. Sergeant Wes Calloway. Specialist Darcy Helms, Corporal Joel Stratton, Lieutenant Connor Whitfield. The memories came. She did not invite them, but she did not resist them either. She had learned that resistance only makes them stronger. Cobble Valley. 3 months after Kandahar. 3 months after she had saved Hargrove's convoy, without him ever knowing her name. A different mission. A different valley. Her team this time. Not strangers she was protecting from a distance, but the people she ate with, trained with, laughed with, the people who knew her real name and her real self in a world where both were classified. 8 operators. Ghost Unit 7. Deployed on intelligence that promised a lightly defended weapons cache in a narrow valley 60 kilometers south of Jalalabad. The intelligence was wrong. The cache was bait. The valley was a kill box. They walked in at dawn, moving in 2 fire teams of 4. Whitfield led the first team. Calloway had pointed his long stride, eating up the rocky ground, his head on a constant swivel. Behind him, Helms moved with the quiet efficiency that had earned her the call sign, Whisper. She was the team's communications specialist, but she could outshoot half the snipers in the regular army and never mentioned it. Stratton brought up the rear of the first team compact and watchful, the kind of soldier who noticed tripwires and pressure plates the way other people notice street signs. He was 24 with a wife back home in Virginia who sent care packages that always included homemade beef jerky the entire unit fought over. Elara was on overwatch, 1 mile south on a ridge that gave her a clear line of sight to the valley floor. She had been in position since 0300, lying in a shallow depression. She had scraped out of the rocky soil, her rifle resting on a bipod, her scope covering the approach route. 4 hours of waiting. 4 hours of reading the wind, watching the shadows change as the sun crept over the mountains, memorizing every fold in the terrain. She saw the ambush before it started. A flash of movement on a ridgeline that should have been empty. A pattern in the rocks that was too regular to be natural. She keyed her radio to warn them, but the first shots came before the words left her mouth. The valley erupted. Gunfire from 3 sides, twice the force they had been briefed to expect. Her team scattered for cover, returning fire immediately, their training taking over in the space between heartbeat and thought. Through her scope, Elara watched it unfold with the terrible clarity of someone who can see everything and touch nothing. She watched Calloway take cover behind a rock that was too small to protect him. He pressed his back against it and made himself as compact as possible, his rifle up, returning fire in controlled bursts. He had always been the loudest one in the team, the one with the biggest laugh, the one who told jokes during briefings, until Whitfield threatened to have him reassigned to a desk. Now his face was blank with concentration, every ounce of his considerable personality channeled into the single task of staying alive. She watched Helms return fire from behind a low wall, moving between positions with fluid economy. Helms never wasted a round, never fired without a target. Her discipline under fire was something Elara recognized because it mirrored her own, the calm that comes not from absence of fear, but from a decision renewed in every moment that fear will not be allowed to interfere with the work. She watched Whitfield, always the leader, always the steady voice on the radio calling coordinates and directing fire with an authority that turned chaos into order. He had a gift Elara had never seen in another officer. He could look at a bad situation and find the one narrow path through it, not around it, not away from it, through it. He saw solutions the way Elara saw ballistic trajectories, with a clarity that was almost mathematical. Elara fired. Her first shot took out a machine gunner on the eastern ridge who had pinned down Calloway's position. The second dropped a spotter, directing fire from a concealed position in the rocks. The third and fourth came in rapid succession, 2 fighters moving along the northern wall who were trying to flank Whitfield's team. She fired and fired and fired. Each shot a calculation. Each calculation a life saved or a life taken. 12 hostiles fell in 43 minutes. She fired until the barrel of her rifle glowed red in the scope's ambient light. She fired until the skin on her trigger finger split and bled until the stock of her rifle was slick with sweat and blood. She fired until her hands cramped and her vision blurred, and the recoil had bruised her shoulder so deeply the skin turned black. And she watched them die anyway. Calloway went first. A round caught him as he moved between cover, hitting him in the gap between his body armor and his hip. He went down hard, tried to crawl, and a second round found him before Elara could find the shooter. Through her scope, she saw his hand reach out toward nothing, then go still. Helms was next. She had moved to help Calloway, and was caught in a crossfire that Elara's position could not fully cover. 2 shooters from different angles firing simultaneously. Elara killed one. The other fired first. Stratton died trying to reach Helms. He ran across open ground that he must have known was suicide, but he ran anyway because that was who Stratton was. He made it 4 steps. Whitfield lasted the longest. He held his position, directed the surviving team members, called in the extraction coordinates, and kept fighting until the rescue helicopters appeared on the horizon. He was hit in the chest 60 seconds before the first helicopter touched down. He died on the medevac, still giving orders, still trying to lead his team home even as his body gave out beneath him. Elara killed 12 men that day. 12 precise shots. 12 problems solved with physics and repetition, and the cold mathematics of survival. But 4 of her 8-person team died. Calloway, Helms, Stratton, Whitfield. She did not miss a shot. She did not hesitate. She did not make a single error in calculation or judgment. She performed with absolute perfection, the kind of perfection she had spent her entire career pursuing, and 4 people she loved still died. That was the wound. Not guilt over a mistake, not the torment of what she could have done differently. The wound was the discovery that perfection is not enough, that you can do everything right, every calculation, every adjustment, every breath and heartbeat timed to the millisecond, and the world will still take people from you. That the math does not care about love, that physics does not negotiate with grief. That was why she left. Not because she was broken, not because she was weak, because she understood in a way that most people never have to, that there are limits to what precision can save, and living with that knowledge while holding a rifle was more than she could bear. She pressed her forehead against the cool granite. The stone smelled of nothing. It was too clean for that polished and maintained a surface designed to hold names forever, a permanence that the people it commemorates were denied. "I am sorry," she whispered it. The words were not for the living. They were for Calloway, who would have laughed at her apology. For Helms, who would have told her to stop being dramatic. For Stratton, who would have punched her shoulder and changed the subject. For Whitfield, who would have said something wise and true and infuriating. Behind her, footsteps crunched on gravel. She did not turn. She knew who it was. Hargrove stood beside her. He looked at the names. He did not speak for a long time, and in that silence there was more understanding than most conversations contain in an hour. "I read the full report," he said finally. "Cobble Valley, 3 months after you saved my team at Kandahar. Your Unit 8 operators walked into compromised intelligence. You held Overwatch alone for 43 minutes against overwhelming numbers, and 4 of them still died. The other 4 survived because of you. 14 of my soldiers are alive because of Kandahar. 18 lives Sinclair. 18 people who went home to their families because you were on that ridge." Elara's jaw tightened. A muscle in her cheek flexed and released. "Math does not make it hurt less," Number Hargrove agreed quietly. "It does not." They stood together in the cold morning light. 2 soldiers who understood that victory and loss are not opposites, but partners, that they walk side by side through every battle, and that the people who carry both learn to move differently through the world, more carefully, more quietly, with a weight that others can sense but never fully understand. "Why did you come back?" Hargrove asked. "To this life. You could have stayed in logistics. Safe, quiet, hidden." Elara finally looked at him. Her eyes were dry. Whatever grief lived in her did not express itself in tears. It expressed itself in the steadiness of her hands, in the precision of her aim, in the decision to wake up every morning and strip a rifle she no longer carried into battle. "Because those 4 did not get a choice. They would want me to keep going, keep training the next generation. Make sure fewer names end up on this wall." Hargrove nodded. "That is why I asked you to lead the program." "I know." "The ceremony is in an hour." "I know that too." She took a deep breath, stepped back from the wall, straightened her uniform, wiped her eyes quickly, a gesture so brief it might have been the wind. "They would have been proud of that shot," Hargrove said. A ghost of a smile crossed Elara's face, the first real warmth Hargrove had seen from her. Calloway would have said I took too long calculating. Helms would have complained about the heat. Stratton would have made a bet about the exact impact point. And Whitfield, the smile faded. Whitfield would have told me to stop living in the past. Good advice. He was full of good advice. She touched the wall one last time, her palm flat against the stone over the 4 names. Did not take enough of it himself. The wind picked up, carrying desert dust and the faint scent of creosote. The flag nearby snapped in the breeze, its fabric popping with a sound like a distant gunshot. Elara did not flinch. She had learned to distinguish between sounds that mattered and sounds that merely reminded her of things that mattered. She took a deep breath of the cold morning air, held it, released it slowly. The same breathing pattern she used behind the rifle. In. Hold. Out. Hold. It worked for controlling heart rate before a shot. It worked for controlling grief at a memorial wall. The body does not know the difference, it only knows rhythm. She walked back toward the main compound. The sun was fully up now, burning away the last of the morning chill, transforming the desert from silver to gold, to the harsh bleached white that would dominate until evening. Soldiers were moving between buildings, beginning their day carrying the ordinary business of military life that continues regardless of ceremonies or revelations or the private grief of women who stand alone before granite walls at dawn. That afternoon, General Hargrove summoned her to his office. The room occupied the second floor of the operations building, a corner space with windows that looked out over the training grounds to the east and the desert to the west. The decoration was Spartan, an American flag in the corner, its fabric slightly faded from the sun that poured through the glass each afternoon. Photographs on the walls, not of Hargrove receiving medals or shaking hands with politicians, but of operations, teams in the field, helicopters against mountain skylines, faces of soldiers, some smiling, some not, some no longer alive to do either. Hargrove stood when she entered. "At ease, Captain. Sit." Elara sat, back straight, hands folded. Hargrove opened a desk drawer and removed a small wooden box. He placed it on the desk between them. The box was similar to the one Elara kept in her locker, the same type of simple wooden container that the military uses for things that matter more than their packaging suggests. "I did some checking," he said. His voice had the careful cadence of a man who has rehearsed what he wants to say and decided to abandon the rehearsal in favor of honesty. Ghost Unit 2014 to 2017. 47 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. 17 missions. The unit was disbanded after Kabul. Most operators were reassigned to other special operations teams. But you. He leaned forward slightly. You requested transfer to logistics. Of all the assignments available to an operator with your record, you chose to count bullets in a supply depot. The honesty she had given him at the memorial wall still hung between them. He did not ask why again. He already knew. But the weight of the answer sat in the room like a third person present and unavoidable. He opened the box. Inside, resting on dark fabric, lay a medal. Simple, unadorned. No eagle, no star, no wreath. Just a circle of brushed silver with a single word engraved on its face. Service. On the back, smaller text, for those who serve in silence. "This is not official," Hargrove said. "You will not find it in any catalogue. It does not correspond to any approved commendation in the Department of Defense Registry. There will not be a press conference. There will not be a parade. Ghost operators do not receive those things. But I had it made, and I wanted you to have it anyway." He walked around the desk and pinned the medal to her uniform himself. His hands were steady, practiced, but there was a gentleness in the gesture that had nothing to do with military protocol and everything to do with one human being honoring another. He was careful with the pin, careful not to prick her, careful in the way that matters most, the way that says this means something to me too. For service above and beyond, for saving lives in silence, for 18 people who went home to their families because you were on a ridge with a rifle and the skill to use it. Elara touched the medal with her fingertips, felt its weight against her chest. It was lighter than a bullet. It was heavier than anything she had carried in years. "Thank you, sir." Hargrove returned to his chair. "There is something else." He slid a folder across the desk. "Manila. Unmarked. We are rebuilding the Ghost Unit. New parameters, new mission profiles, new operators. We are calling it Project Phantom. Same concept, elite operators, impossible missions, zero acknowledgement." Elara opened the folder. 5 dossiers. Photographs clipped to the upper corners. Young faces. 3 men, 2 women. Eager eyes and strong jaws, and the particular brand of confidence that comes from being good at something and not yet knowing how little that matters when the world decides to test you for real. "These are my students, your team. You will train them, lead them, shape them into something this military has never seen before." Elara studied the faces. So young, so certain of themselves, so unaware of what real combat costs. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. One condition. Name it. If I take this, I run it my way. No politics, no press, no glory. We succeed in shadows or we do not succeed at all." Agreed. She closed the folder, stood, saluted. As she reached the door, Hargrove called out, "Captain Sinclair." She turned. "For what it is worth," he said. and his voice was no longer the voice of a general speaking to a subordinate, but the voice of a man speaking to someone who had saved his life. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see you." Elara's expression softened. "Not much. A degree, a fraction. The way stone softens when light hits it at the right angle, not changing its nature, but revealing something that was always there beneath the surface. You see me now, sir. That is what matters." She left. Hargrove watched her go. Then he looked at the photograph on his desk, the one he had kept for 3 years. His team in Afghanistan, 2016. 14 soldiers standing in the dust, squinting at the camera, alive. All of them alive because of a ghost they never met until now. An hour later, the parade ground filled with soldiers in dress uniforms. The ceremony was small. No media, no civilians, no politicians making speeches about sacrifice they had never experienced. Just military personnel who understood what this moment represented without needing it explained. The parade ground was a rectangle of packed earth bordered by flagpoles on 3 sides. The American flag hung from the center pole, barely moving in the still afternoon air. To the east, visible from every seat, the memorial wall caught the sunlight and held it. Hargrove stood at the podium. Elara stood to his right, uncomfortable with the attention the way a deep-sea creature is uncomfortable in sunlight. She had spent 3 years training herself to be invisible. Standing in front of 200 people felt like standing naked in a searchlight. "We do not often acknowledge the work done in shadows," Hargrove began. His voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of something personal that the soldiers in the front rows could hear. "We do not always honor the victories won in silence. The intelligence reports get filed, the after-action reviews get classified, the names get sealed, and the men and women who did the work go on to their next assignment or their next life without anyone ever knowing what they did or what it cost them." He paused, looked at Elara, then back at the crowd. "But today we recognize Captain Elara Sinclair Viper 1 for exceptional service to this nation." He turned to her fully now, addressing her as much as the assembly. "Captain Sinclair embodies what we hope to see in every soldier. Skill without ego, strength without arrogance, precision without cruelty. She has saved lives in ways most of us will never know, lives that went home to families who will never learn how close they came to receiving a folded flag instead of a homecoming. And now she has agreed to train the next generation of ghost operators." Quiet applause moved through the formation. Hargrove stepped back and gestured to the podium. Elara faced the assembled troops. 200 faces, young and old, officers and enlisted. Men and women who had chosen a life of service and who understood at varying depths what that choice truly meant. She spoke the way she shot. One word at a time, precisely placed, nothing wasted. "I am not a hero. I am a soldier who learned to aim carefully. The real heroes are on that wall behind you. They are the ones who ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. I just made sure the fewer of them had to." She paused. The silence was complete. "If I can teach you anything, it is this. Precision is a form of compassion. Every bullet you do not waste is a life you might save, yours or someone else's. So when I train you, I will not teach you to be killers. I will teach you to be surgical, clean, efficient, respectful of the weight that comes with pulling a trigger. We start tomorrow. Be ready to work, be ready to fail, and be ready to become better than you think you can be." She stepped back. The flag overhead moved in a wind that had traveled across the entire desert to reach this place. Red and white and blue against an endless sky. That evening Elara packed, methodically. Clothes folded to identical dimensions, equipment arranged by function, personal items reduced to what fit in a single pocket, everything in 2 duffel bags and a rifle case. Traveling light was a habit from her ghost unit days. Never carry more than you can run with. A knock. Hargrove entered holding a manila folder. "Your orders. Official transfer to Special Operations Training Command. And unofficially Project Phantom. 5 recruits. Full autonomy. You train them, you lead them, you decide when they are ready." Elara opened the folder. Deployment schedules, training protocols, 5 photographs. "They look confident," she said. "They are. That is the problem. Confidence without competence gets people killed. And you think I can teach them the difference? I think you can show them what real competence looks like, what discipline looks like, what it means to serve in silence without needing anyone to know your name." Hargrove extended his hand. Not a salute this time. A handshake. "Thank you, Captain, for coming back, for trusting us again." Elara took his hand. Her grip was firm. "Do not make me regret it." "I will do my best." 2 hours later. A C-130 cargo plane sat on the runway, its engines warming up with a low, steady roar that vibrated the tarmac. The sun was setting and the Arizona sky had become a canvas, orange bleeding into purple, dissolving into the deep blue that precedes darkness. The desert stretched in every direction, vast and indifferent and eternal, the kind of landscape that makes human concerns feel very small and very temporary. Elara walked across the tarmac carrying her 2 bags and her rifle case. Her boots made solid sounds on the concrete. Behind her, the base was settling into its evening routine, lights coming on in the barracks, the mess hall filling with the sound of trays and conversation, the distant crack of a rifle from the range where someone was still practicing, still trying, still believing that the next shot would be the one that matters. She paused at the bottom of the loading ramp and looked back. The base spread out behind her in the fading light, the buildings casting long shadows that reached toward her like fingers. Building 7 was visible in the distance, its windows dark, her desk already cleared, her clipboard hanging empty on the wall. 3 years of her life in that building. 3 years of counting other people's ammunition and pretending that was enough. She turned back to the plane and climbed the ramp. The cargo bay smelled of hydraulic fluid and metal, and the particular sterile coldness of military aircraft. She found a seat on the webbed bench along the fuselage wall, stowed her bag strapped in. The rifle case she kept at her feet within reach. Old habits. The loadmaster gave her a nod from across the bay. She returned it. The ramp closed with a hydraulic groan, sealing out the last of the desert light. The engines increased their pitch. The aircraft began to taxi slow at first, then faster, the runway lights blurring past the small windows. From her pocket, Elara removed the bullet casing. Silver, polished, engraved with coordinates that pointed to a valley where 4 people she loved were buried in the earth, and 4 names were carved in granite 6,000 miles away. She held the casing up. The last light filtering through the window caught it, and for a moment it glowed warm and bright, a tiny star held between her fingers. She thought of Calloway, who would have made a joke about the accommodations on the C-130. She thought of Helms, who would have been asleep before the wheels left the ground, her ability to sleep anywhere a source of constant envy. She thought of Stratton, who would have been writing a letter to his wife the way he always did before a deployment, folding it carefully and tucking it into his vest pocket. She thought of Whitfield, who would have been reviewing the mission brief one more time, running scenarios, finding the path through. They were with her. They were always with her. Not as ghosts, not as hauntings, but as the 4 pillars that held up the architecture of who she had become. Every calculation she made carried their fingerprints. Every shot she would ever fire would be aimed in part by what they had taught her. And every recruit she trained from this day forward would carry a piece of them without ever knowing it. Then she tucked the casing back into her pocket over her heart, where it had rested for 3 years, and would rest for as long as she carried it, which would be forever. She opened the folder on her lap. 5 dossiers. 5 recruits waiting at a facility she had never seen to begin a training program that would push them past everything they thought they knew about themselves. She turned the pages slowly. 3 men, 2 women, all young, all talented, all carrying the particular confidence of people who have excelled at everything they have attempted and have not yet encountered the thing that will teach them humility. The first recruit was a former college wrestler from Montana who had transitioned to special operations with the highest physical fitness scores in his class. Strong, aggressive, the kind of soldier who solved problems with force and had never considered that force might not be the answer. He would need to learn patience. Elara could teach patience. She had spent 4 hours lying in a scrape on a ridge in Afghanistan waiting for a shot that lasted less than a second. The second was a signals intelligence specialist who had shown exceptional aptitude for pattern recognition. Quiet, analytical, the kind of mind that sees systems where others see chaos. He would need to learn to trust his instincts when the systems fail. Elara could teach that too. The third was a combat medic with 2 tours and a Silver Star. He had seen what bullets do to human bodies and had chosen to stay anyway. He would understand the weight of the trigger better than the others. He might understand it too well. The fourth was a woman from Texas who had broken every marksmanship record at her training facility and had been told repeatedly that her scores must be errors. She carried that doubt like armor, turned it into fuel, used it to push harder than anyone around her. Elara recognized that fuel. She had burned it herself for 15 years. She stopped at the last dossier. Private First Class Mara Kingsley, 22 years old. The photograph showed a young woman with sharp eyes and a jawline set at an angle that suggested she had opinions and was not interested in keeping them to herself. Her file noted exceptional scores in long-range marksmanship, a background in competitive shooting that started at age 12, and a disciplinary note for insubordination after she had corrected a senior officer's wind reading during a training exercise. She had been right about the wind reading. There was something in her expression, a defiance tempered by intelligence, a refusal to be diminished that coexisted with a willingness to learn that Elara recognized. She had seen that expression before, in a mirror, a decade ago, before Afghanistan, before Kabul, before the wooden box and the silver casing and the 4 names and the 3 years of silence. Elara. Sinclair smiled. It was a small smile, barely a movement of the lips, but it reached her eyes for the first time in this story, and it transformed her face from stone to something warmer, something that remembered what hope felt like and was willing cautiously to feel it again. The C-130 lifted off. The landing gear retracted with a mechanical thump. The aircraft rose into a sky that was darkening from blue to black, climbing through layers of air that grew colder and thinner with every 100 feet of altitude. Below, the desert receded. The base became a cluster of lights, then a speck, then nothing. The mountains flattened into shadows. The horizon curved. Somewhere ahead, at a facility that did not appear on any map, 5 recruits were sleeping their last comfortable sleep. Tomorrow, they would meet a woman who would dismantle everything they believed about themselves and rebuild it from the ground up. They would hate her for it. Then they would respect her for it. Then, if they were strong enough and humble enough and willing enough to endure the process, they would understand why she did it. Because 4 names on a granite wall demanded it. Because precision is a form of compassion. Because ghosts do not exist, but their aim never dies. Elara leaned her head against the cold metal wall of the fuselage. She closed her eyes. The engines hummed around her, a steady mechanical lullaby that filled the darkness with sound and vibration. For the first time in 3 years, she did not dream of the dead. She dreamed of the living, of 5 young faces she had not yet met, of lessons she had not yet taught, of a future that for the first time in a very long time felt like something worth aiming for. The plane flew west into the night, carrying a ghost toward the people who would learn what it means to disappear, and why disappearing done right is the most powerful thing a person can do.